Hello everybody, welcome to Chop and Brew. I am Chip Walton, your host, reporting once again from the basement home brewery. Before me sit the makings of a sour beer to be. 5 gallons of a pale English mild, thus far unaffected by anything other than British ale yeast, and half a gallon of buggy, awesome, dreggy leftovers from a Flanders Red inherited from my buddy Vaughn. But that is not a story for this episode. That's a story for another episode. In this episode, we're going to talk to a homebrewer named Keith Ciani out of Colorado, who has inspired me to do such things as put this into that. Keith is an award-winning homebrewer who thus far in 2014 has brought home, I believe, 2 medals for the Chop and Brew Homebrew Club. In this episode, I hang out with Keith and his baby girl at their condo in Denver, and we discuss Keith's experience with small space brewing, the joy of making sour beers, and he's got a great DIY method for lagering at home without a chest freezer or fridge. And the dude is all about nice presentation. So we talk about making homemade labels and wax dipping your homebrew. I, the Chip Walton of 2014, will return after that episode, that conversation with Keith, to tell you real quick about how you can see another video of me and Don Osborne delivering some tasting notes on a beer that Keith sent me home with from Denver, a 14% English strong ale I call ANGLOZILLA, in which he used a staggered yeast starter addition process during fermentation. So this guy's got all kinds of great ideas, great home brewer. So let's take a trip back in time to 2013 and meet the brewer, Keith Ciani. Welcome to Chop and Brew, everybody. I am Chip Walton. This is
Keith Ciani.
This is
Nola, New Orleans.
Yeah, man. We're in Keith's apartment in Denver, Colorado. I'm in town representing Summit Brewing Company for the Great American Beer Festival. I had kind of a rough GABF Eve last night, but I'm feeling a lot better.
Me too.
And I couldn't pass up the opportunity. This guy is it's a home brewer. He was a huge Brewing TV fan from like day -1. From day 0, now he's a good Chop and Brew fan. He's a home brewer. He's also the source of the bug yeast that Dono and I were washing episode 4 or something of Chop and Brew. So I've always wanted to meet this guy in person. We're going to talk with him real quick about homebrewing. So stick around. Chop for chop.
Brew for brew.
High five. Keith, man, awesome. We've got Dono, our mutual friend in spirit, right here. Kind of interesting. Tell me about how you started homebrewing and how Dono played a role in that.
Yeah, I started in grad school at University of Missouri in Columbia about 2004, 2005. My buddy Kip was brewing at the time in Kansas City, and he actually recently started Open Big Rip Brewing in Kansas City. So I got into extract. My wife actually bought me a kit. I did that for quite a few years. The beer wasn't very good. My big problem was rushing things a lot. I just rushed primary fermentation, bottling, and that was the biggest problem. Started all grain brewing in maybe 2009, after watching the Mother Teresa of homebrewing, Don Osborne's all grain, easy guide to all grain homebrewing video. I really had no intention of all grain brewing. I had it in my head it would be really hard,
yep.
and that I couldn't do it. And I watched this video and I just said I could do that. So I threw together stuff I had, went to Home Depot, made a wort chiller, and was all grain brewing in my apartment. And the beer quality turned out great. And I moved to Denver and have been all grain brewing here for the last 4 years. So that's kind of been it.
Uh-oh. And one of Keith's, I don't know if it's specialties or at least his obsession, is the sour beers. Accurate?
Started brewing sour beers about 3-4 years ago. Talked to a buddy who had done a few. I was kind of scared of it, like a lot of homebrewers are. I had a lot of horror stories about, you know, the Brett's gonna get in your air conditioning system and you'll never brew a clean beer again. But I just took good advice from friends to use separate equipment, everything separate, everything separate, everything separate. I ferment in different rooms. This is a very small condo. There's only a room there and a room there, and I do my you know, Saccharomyces ales and lagers in there, and I do my my sours in that room, and just really try to keep them separate. I bottle all those. I don't mess with kegging sours, and I've never had any kind of cross-contamination. Not at all. I don't worry about controlling fermentation temperatures for sours because I don't have that ability for sours. I can only do it for my regular beers. But that's not too big of an issue with sours sometimes.
So your original problem as an extract brewer of not rushing things, learning that lesson definitely helps with sours, right? We're talking like get ready to just forget that you have it as long as you can. Yeah,
I remember the sour Brewing TV episode where I think Dawson said something about just, you know, go ahead and brew and forget about it, and then brew another one and just forget about them. Yep. And it's hard with your first couple sours. It's really hard. You stare at it every day. I read a book on sours, and they said something like, don't look at it, you know, once a month. And I was staring at this thing every day. I've had a sour in there for over a year. I haven't looked at it in a couple months before we just took a peek at it. Yeah. So really, once you have a couple going, you forget about them. And usually you don't have time to bottle them anyway, so it's a good thing to just let them sit.
Beyond the, you know, the separation of fermentation kind of stuff, what kind of helpful hints are there for crafting a good sour beer? Kind of on the production side, I guess, almost more than the process. Like, what kind of words work well, what don't, what flavors have you particularly found?
Worts are pretty easy because you're just kind of looking at a nice base beer with a little bit of character, maybe a little bit of carapils, some real light Munich. And some pills, and it doesn't take much if you just want to do kind of a straight up something to highlight the bugs and the Brettanomyces. I've done 100% fermentations with Brett. It works great. You know, that's not going to make a sour beer. It'll make a really clean beer actually. I'll add the bacteria. I've kind of done all kinds. You know, Saccharomyces, Brettanomyces, lacto and PDO kind of up front. I've done Saccharomyces and Brettanomyces for primary fermentation, then add the bugs a month or so down the road and let them sit.
You blend, you add fruit. You were saying you'll rack like the last gallon off of a legit beer, and you'll put it in a gallon. Say you're racking off like a quad, just a straight quad. You might save the last gallon and kind of juice it with some fruit or something just to see if you can get less than a dozen bottles of something very unique.
Yeah, I did a bunch of 1 gallon sours. So I would brew a little heavy on a bigger wort, like where it would give me about 6 gallons, and 5 would go to my Saccharomyces, and 1 would go fresh into a 1 gallon jug. And you can pitch a culture of Brett and even add some fruit. Or I fermented beers in primary, regular beers, and when I rack the secondary, I'll rack 4 gallons, and I'll rack a gallon off into a gallon jug, and I'll add some Brett, Brux, and some blueberries or something like that, or some sour bugs, or some dregs from a bottle sour. Put them in there, maybe add raspberries, and just give it time. And I'll bottle those, and you can get 8 to 12 bottles. It's a little tedious, but you know, I did that 2 years ago, and I still have some of those bottles from those 1 gallon batches. They last a long time.
So this is patient 0 of the potterification that I've done, and a couple that Donna has done, and
I think Michael Dawson used it once or twice.
Oh.
Yeah.
So this got around, man, but this is the original batch.
Original batch. So this is, I call this the fur. This is Nicole Eggert inspired for some old Baywatch fans. Took Russian River Sanctification, 4 bottles, and cultured up the dregs from those 4 bottles, which is quite a bit. You probably don't need that much, but we like to drink Sanctification. We cultured up a big starter, took off right away. The good thing about using bugs from a place like Russian River is it's so fresh, and the yeast are so healthy in the bugs. It really takes off.
They've been treating them right.
Rather than using an import or something like that. So that took off, 100% fermentation with that, and this is it. And this one actually only sat in primary for about 4 months, and it was done, because it's mainly a Brett beer.
It's much harder than anything I've had made off of its children.
Yeah. If you've had Sanctification, you might have been confused. It does say 100% Brett fermented, but you get some tartness, and I thought it's probably from the Brett, but They do ferment 100% in bread in stainless steel, and then I think they add a little lacto or PDO at bottling. I think that's the case. I don't know. So this beer actually, I think, tastes identical to Sanctification. Really, really close. Wow. Sweet tarty, very tartness going on.
Sweet tart, a little. I don't know the nice way to say it, and I know that there's a term, but it's kind of vomitous. Kind of like the aftertaste of vomit, but in a good way.
There's a funk.
Dude, there's an adjective, there's a scientific word. I'm totally spacing on it, and 1,800 people will instantly comment on this video, but it's there. It's that
hot puke?
That harsh.
It's not like an acetic acid nail polish remover. It's pretty low. I have other beers that's apparent. You get a little more nail polish remover. This is more of like a sweet tart. But there is kind of like a sock funk to it that has changed over time. Lemony, it's very citrusy, I think. But since I washed the yeast very carefully and shared those bugs with Don, and his beers have turned out 100% Brett character. No tartness at all. Really beautiful beers, but just clean Brett. So I think the lacto or PDO, whatever was in there, which was minuscule, didn't make it through the washing. And I think that's common, normal. And so it's been producing clean beers, which that beer is done with just a Brett strain anyway. So I think that's kind of gone through with your beers.
10-4, good buddy.
Good
what
work.
about the labels? I noticed, and I've always appreciated your awesome labels.
When I bottle I don't bottle much sours and some regular beers. I try to go all out. I used to have a buddy, Jamie Smith, in Columbia, Missouri, also helped me out getting into all grain brewing. And he did these great labels, kind of blew my mind, and he waxed. So I always go through the time to wax and do labels. I got a buddy in Boulder who's good with Photoshop, does my labels. Oh, okay. I'll give him ideas or photos, and he kind of puts it together sometimes or tweaks things. Grab the like the Pest House label.
Yeah, this one's really cool.
So I'd send him a photo or an idea, and he'd kind of run with it. I don't know how that's gonna look.
We have do cutaways too.
Yeah, we'll do a cutaway. And I get them. I kind of know the sizes. I get them printed through Kinko's. I cut them myself, and then the wax. I buy the wax you can get from a homebrew shop, but I'll cut it with miniature glue sticks and sometimes a couple crayons. But the key with waxing is you really want a good proportion of wax. A lot of people use all glue sticks and crayons, and it becomes too hard to even open.
Huh? Yeah.
It's so hard to open, and
that's because commercial beers that you just have to take a knife to them.
And it's because wax is expensive, so they really are, cutting it with glue sticks, which I do. But you just gotta have a good amount of wax in there. You don't want 100% wax. I find it's too thin.
It's not just aesthetic, though, right? I mean, this helps sealing it for years of holding.
Yeah, and it helps with that too, which is good with sours. I mean, a lot of these sours have been sitting around for 2-3 years, and I still have a lot left of them. This one is down to about 2 or 3 bottles.
Do you have brewing on deck for the winter?
I do. Funny thing, I was another thing that kind of Don and Brewing TV helped out a lot. I was living in Kansas City, Missouri, and that's not Minnesota, and not a lot of people lager. There's not a big lager culture there. And I never thought I could do a lager. I just didn't think I'd be able to do it. I thought it'd be so hard, so I waited a long time to do it.
We're talking, she's like, I hate lagers. Ales only in my house.
German, Christine Precision. German. Never thought I could do lagers and just started. I think I've only done 3. I've only brewed 3 lagers, and I have a Helles in the fermenter, and I'm loving it now. I can't brew as often now that I have a baby. I'm a stay-at-home dad. So I can only brew maybe once every 2 months, so I can brew it, let them sit, and then they can sit on tap and lager for a long time. So I'm on a huge lager kick right now, big time.
Do you have a fridge when you say the Helles is sitting somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay. And
I can show you, I've got a cooler, and it's able to fit 4 Smart Water ice bottles around. And I've learned through 4 years of doing this what each bottle, 2 bottles, 3 bottles, 4 bottles will bring that temp to. I've got thermometers in there, and I can lager easily with just 4 ice bottles.
But you change them out daily, or
3 times a day. It's a huge pain in the ass. I'm moving out of this condo brewing is hard. I'm moving out of this condo this summer, and I'm gonna get controlled fermentation.
Of course, man.
No, 3 times a day, and that's okay when you work from home and you're a stay-at-home dad, but no one has time for that. So just some cardboard type stuff. I have different sizes for different carboys.
And then your bottles are, oh yeah, in the corners.
And they fit. These smart water bottles with the labels torn off. I've got about, you know, you want to have about like 12 in the fridge because every time you rotate,
right,
they need to refreeze. But it can be done. You can lager with...
What temperature is that you're aiming for?
I can lager anywhere, you know, 48 to 51 and really dial it in and then raise it up slowly. But it takes someone who stays at home with a kid all day.
So you have like 2 sets of 4 that you just keep circulating.
4 corners, I'll show you. You can get a shot of it.
Yeah.
Just they go down the sides, and I have the top, and then I kind of cover it, and it really insulates it well. Makes it very easy to ferment at lager temperatures. And I actually lager in my kegs under pressure. Some debate about that. I can crash down to about 43 in there, but that's as low as it's going to get. So I actually just do primary with lagers. I let them sit about a month, which is probably more than you need to. And then I raise them up a little, crash them down, and just rack, and then I try not to drink it for like 3 weeks. And it just kind of will lager and get better with time under a little bit of pressure.
Gotcha. Cool. Those are 2 new things. Interesting things that you can try at home. I've done the bottle method before, but only to get like 70 down to 60. I've never tried that intense. I don't know if I'd have the dedication to it.
Yeah, and you don't have to with lagers. I mean, there is some wiggle room, and they're still going to turn out good. I mean, I like, you know, they tell you to chill your wort down to like 45 before you pitch and bring it up. And I do that sometimes, but sometimes my pump doesn't like it and doesn't get that far. And that's okay. I mean, they can be forgiving too.
Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I do have to walk back to the GABF at some point. First session is tonight. Keith will actually be there. Keith gets a night out on the town too.
Every year, Thursday and Saturday.
Yeah?
Yeah. Nola has a babysitter tonight.
And yeah, thanks for having us over. Thanks for joining us, Dono.
Yeah, shout out to Don, Chip, Keeler, Dawson. Forgetting anybody? Brian Adams. King.
Ted and Paul.
All those guys.
There's a crew. The crew's getting bigger for sure. Alright, man. Till the next time. Chop chop.
Brew for brew.
She's like, that smells sour.
She barely hung on.
There we go.
Hopefully that didn't...
Thanks.
Like
no, man, that's real stuff, man.
Yeah.
That's real stuff. Homebrewers have lives too. Wives and lives. Back here in the basement in 2014, I want to give just huge, unlimited thanks to Keith for not only his years of support for all of the video projects I've been involved in and just inspiring me to do wacky and fun things, but also for sharing the love. He's hooking up the recipes for 2 of those sour beers. Go to chopandbrew.com/recipes. Look for Keith Ciani's sour beer recipes. The recipes are on there. Obviously, it's hard to peg sour beers, but he definitely gives some advice and tips and techniques and conversation, further discussion about what he's done to get where he's gotten with a couple of beers. And as I promised, go to chopandbrew.com/lagniappe and look for tasting notes ANGLOZILLA. There you're going to find me and Don Osborne tasting a 14% English strong ale that Keith brewed, and he got it to that high alcohol volume by feeding it a staggered yeast starter addition throughout fermentation. So we go a little into that. It was a really fun tasting note session actually with Dono. So check that out at Lagniappe's, and thank all of you for your support as always. Chopandbrew.com. Click on shop for shirts and t-shirts, and just keep tuning in, man. We love doing what we're doing. Big shout outs to everybody. Keith, Dono, Baby Nola, all you guys. Chop for chop, brew for brew. Get it done. Blooper reel. Do you like the blooper reel? Did you get that it was there at first?
Oh, for the original episodes?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
A lot of people are like, I think, just tuned out after the credits. Because people would be like, oh, that's cool, you started doing bloopers at like episode 8. I'm like, no man, since day one, there's been plenty of good footage for
hanging out for the end.
Yeah, the blooper reels are my favorite part because as I'm editing an episode, I just start watching all the raw footage. I pull out the stuff I know is good, but if I see a clip that I know is not going to make the episode, but it's funny, I just start backloading it. So I end up having to do like a second job of editing this blooper episode after the credits, because I'll end up with like 12 minutes of bloopers, and you never want that. I try to keep it about a minute and a half or 2. So, watch your blooper reels, everybody. It's like drinking your milk and eating your veggies. Alright.